The title clerk's hands were trembling as she pulled the third document from the filing cabinet. She kept glancing at me, then back at the yellowed paper, then at me again. Finally, she set it down on the counter between us and said, "Mr. Turner, I need to get my supervisor. Please don't go anywhere." Her voice cracked on the last word. I stood there in that musty county records office, staring at my uncle's signature from 1967, and for the first time in 8 months, I felt something other than despair. I felt possibility. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from where it really began. My name is David Turner, and I'm 63 years old. For 42 years, I built things. Not just buildings, though that's what my architecture degree said I did. I built relationships. I built a reputation. I built a company. And I built what I thought was an unbreakable partnership with my best friend. I met James Cordova in 1982, fresh out of grad school. We were both junior architects at Morrison & Klein in downtown Seattle, competing for the same promotion, working 100-hour weeks, surviving on coffee and ambition. One night around 2 a.m., both of us still at our drafting tables, he looked over at my design for a community center and said, "That's brilliant. You should win." I was so shocked by the generosity that I actually stopped working. He continued, "But if you add a south-facing clerestory here," he sketched quickly on my trace, "you'll get natural light that'll save them 30% on energy costs. That'll seal it." He was right. I got the promotion. But I never forgot what he did. When I left Morrison & Klein 5 years later to start my own firm, the first call I made was to James. "Want to build something real together?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "I'll have my resignation letter done by morning." Turner and Cordova Architecture became Turner and Cordova Development in 1995. We'd spent a decade designing buildings for other people and realized we could do it better if we controlled the whole process. We started small, renovating a historic warehouse in Pioneer Square, converting it to loft apartments. We lived in 2 of those units ourselves, poured every dollar back into the business, ate ramen, and dreamed big. By 2010, we'd completed 17 projects. By 2020, 43. We'd developed a reputation for restoration work, bringing old Seattle buildings back to life while respecting their history. We weren't the biggest firm, but we were respected. We were partners in every sense, equal ownership, equal decision-making, equal trust. I met my wife Sarah in 1998 at a zoning board meeting. She was there opposing our project, representing a neighborhood coalition. I was there defending it. We argued for 45 minutes. Afterward, she said, "You made some good points. Want to get coffee and argue more?" We got married 2 years later. She became our company's community liaison, the bridge between our developments and the neighborhoods they affected. She was perfect at it, turning critics into advocates. We had 2 kids, Michael, born in 2001, and Jennifer, born in 2003. Good kids. Michael went into environmental engineering. Jennifer, following her mother, became a community organizer. Neither wanted the family business, and I was fine with that. James had no children, never married. He used to say the company was his family. Looking back now, maybe that should have been a warning sign. But at the time, it just felt like dedication. The trouble started with the Belltown Tower project. In 2023, we got the opportunity of a lifetime. A 14-story office building from 1928, sitting abandoned for 15 years, right in the heart of Belltown. The owner had died. The heirs wanted to sell, and the city wanted someone to restore it. The building was magnificent. Art Deco details, original terrazzo floors, brass fixtures. It needed everything, but the bones were solid. The price was $12 million. We'd have to put in another $30 million for renovation. It would be our biggest project by far. Everything we'd built would have to go into it, our savings, our credit, everything. James was enthusiastic. "This is what we've worked 40 years for, David. This is our legacy project. This is the building people will remember us for." Sarah was cautious. "That's a lot of risk," she said. "What if something goes wrong?" I told her what I believed. We've done this 43 times. We know what we're doing, and James has my back. We secured financing, bought the building, and started renovation in April 2024. The first 6 months went perfectly, ahead of schedule, under budget. I'd stop by the site every morning, walk through with my coffee, imagining what it would look like finished. James handled the business side: contracts, permits, payments. That was our arrangement. I was the creative one. He was the numbers guy. It had worked for 40 years. Then in October, small things started feeling wrong. Subcontractors began asking me about late payments. "David, we're 3 weeks overdue. Is everything okay?" I'd check with James, who'd say, "Just a banking delay. I'll handle it." The general contractor pulled me aside. "We need to talk about some change orders." James approved things that weren't in the budget. I looked at the orders. They seemed fine, necessary even. I signed off. Sarah noticed James was different too. "He seems stressed," she said one night. "Have you asked if he's okay?" I had. He'd said he was fine, just busy. "You know how it is on a big project, David. Lots of balls in the air." In December, I got a call from our bank. "Mr. Turner, we need to discuss your line of credit. You're approaching your limit." I was confused. We'd drawn maybe 40% of the line. "There must be a mistake," I said. "Let me have James call you." That evening, I went to James's house, a place I'd been hundreds of times for dinners, game nights, celebrations. His housekeeper answered. "Mr. Cordova is traveling," she said. "When will he be back?" I asked. She looked uncomfortable. He didn't say. The next morning, I went to our office early and did something I'd never done in 42 years. I opened James's computer. His password was still his birthday. I'd set up his accounts decades ago, and he'd never changed it. It took me 4 hours to piece together what I was looking at. Then I called our attorney. Tom Brighton had been our lawyer since 1989. He arrived at 6 p.m., and I showed him everything. He sat silent for a long time, then said, "David, you need to prepare yourself. This is bad." Over the next 3 weeks, we discovered the full scope. James had been systematically draining the company for 18 months. He'd created shell companies, approved fake invoices, rerouted payments. The Belltown project was already $14 million over budget money that had gone into his pocket. Our line of credit was maxed out. Our accounts were empty. The loans I thought we'd secured? He'd forged my signature to get additional personal loans against the company, then defaulted on them. Total loss: $23 million. Everything Sarah and I had saved. Our retirement accounts, our home equity, our kids' inheritance, all of it was in the company, and all of it was gone. The building was half renovated, and we had no money to finish it. Contractors were filing liens. The bank started foreclosure proceedings. And James? He was in the Cayman Islands. Tom found communications between James and a lawyer named Marcus Vega. They'd been planning this for 2 years, setting up offshore accounts, creating the paper trail. Marcus was the one who'd structured the loans, who'd notarized the forged documents. They were partners in the theft. "We need to file immediately," Tom said. "Criminal charges, civil suit, everything." "But David," he paused, "this is going to get ugly. They've left a paper trail that makes it look like you knew. That you were complicit." "What?" I couldn't process it. "How?" He showed me. Emails from my account approving the fraudulent payments, signatures on documents, meeting minutes where I supposedly agreed to everything. All forgeries, but sophisticated ones. "They're going to claim you were in on it," then got cold feet. "That this is your attempt to avoid responsibility." The criminal complaint was filed in January 2025. Within a week, James returned to Seattle with Marcus Vega as his attorney, claiming he was the victim of my fraud. He alleged that I had stolen the money, forged his signatures, and when I got caught, tried to blame him. The evidence they presented was compelling because it was our own company. Records altered, doctored, manipulated, but based on real documents. The prosecutor, after reviewing everything, made a decision that destroyed me. He was bringing charges against both of us, pending investigation, both of us. My passport was flagged. My assets were frozen. Sarah and I couldn't access our bank accounts. We couldn't sell our house because there was a lien on it. We couldn't even touch our retirement funds. Everything was evidence. Then the civil suits started. Contractors sued the company. The bank sued us personally. Investors in the project sued both me and James. And James, through Marcus Vega, sued me for defamation and fraud, seeking damages. Sarah tried to be strong, but I could see the doubt creeping in. "David," she said one night in February, "I need you to tell me the truth. Did you know anything about this? Anything at all?" The fact that she had to ask broke something inside me. "No," I said. "I trusted him. I trusted him like I trust you." Michael called. "Dad, people are asking me about this. They're saying you and James stole money, that you're both going to prison. My firm is reviewing my employment because of the publicity. They're asking if I was involved." Jennifer was more direct. "Dad, tell me you didn't do this. Tell me this isn't who you are." The worst part was I couldn't prove my innocence. Every piece of evidence that showed James's guilt also implicated me. Every forged signature looked enough like mine that handwriting experts couldn't be certain. Every fake email came from my account. James had my passwords. We'd always shared everything. Tom did his best, but he was a contracts lawyer, not a criminal defense attorney. In March, he referred me to someone who specialized in fraud cases. Her name was Rebecca Huang, and her retainer was $50,000. I had $3,847 in a checking account. Sarah didn't know about emergency money my father had taught me to keep. "Always have enough for a plane ticket and a lawyer," he'd said. Rebecca met with me and reviewed everything. "Mr. Turner, I'm going to be honest with you. The evidence against you is circumstantial, but substantial. The evidence in your favor is your character, and the fact that this doesn't make logical sense. Why would you steal from yourself?" She paused. "The problem is, prosecutors don't need to prove motive, just opportunity and action, and you had both." "What are my options?" I asked. "We fight. But fighting costs money you don't have. We'd need forensic accountants, expert witnesses, investigators to track James's movements and spending. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars." I looked at my hands. They were the hands that had drafted buildings, signed contracts, shaken on deals. They were 63-year-old hands that had built a 40-year career, and they were empty. "What if I had some money?" I asked. "How much would it take? To fight this properly? To clear your name and go after James? 300,000 minimum, maybe $500,000 to be safe." I left her office and walked for hours through the rain. I ended up at the original Turner and Cordova building, that Pioneer Square warehouse we'd renovated in 1995. I stood outside, looking up at it, remembering the hope we'd had. We'd saved this building. We'd given it new life. And now James had taken everything we'd built together and turned it to ash. My phone rang. "Sarah, where are you?" she asked. "I'm looking at our bank statement. They've frozen our accounts. How are we supposed to live? How do we pay for food?" I could hear her crying. In 37 years together, I'd heard her cry maybe 5 times. "I'll figure it out," I said. "How? How are you going to figure this out?" Her voice cracked. "Everyone thinks you're a criminal, David. Our friends won't return my calls. Jennifer hasn't spoken to me in 3 weeks. Michael's firm put him on leave. We're going to lose our house. We're going to lose everything because you trusted the wrong person." The line went dead. I sat down on the wet sidewalk, my back against the building I'd saved, and I let myself acknowledge the truth. I had lost. James had won. And there was nothing I could do about it. That's when I remembered my Uncle Frank. Uncle Frank was my father's younger brother, a peculiar man who'd never married, never had much money, but always seemed content. He'd been a surveyor for King County, spending his days walking property lines, documenting boundaries. He died in 2015 at 92, left me his surveying equipment and a letter that said, "You build on land, David. Never forget the land itself has value, has history, has secrets. If you ever need help, remember what I taught you about records." I'd never fully understood what he meant, but suddenly, at 63, sitting in the rain, I thought about property records, about documentation, about paper trails that couldn't be forged. The next morning, I went to the King County Records Office. "I need to see all property transactions involving Cordova," I told the clerk. "Everything from 1967 to present." She looked at me strangely. I was wearing a jacket that needed cleaning. I hadn't shaved in a week, but she led me to the microfiche machines. I spent 11 hours that day going through records. I found our company's properties, our transactions, everything properly documented. Nothing unusual. I was about to give up when I decided to check one more thing. Had James owned any property before we became partners? Any land, any buildings, anything that might show a pattern? That's when I found it. In 1983, James's father had purchased a small plot of land in Maple Valley for $17,000. It was logged as transferring to James Cordova in 1985. I pulled up the satellite imagery on my phone. The plot was still empty, 3 acres of nothing, 40 years later. Why would James keep empty land for 40 years? I checked the tax records. The property taxes had been paid every year, but not by James. They'd been paid from a holding company, Cordova Properties, LLC. I'd never heard of it. It wasn't part of our business. I requested every document associated with that property. The clerk brought me a thick folder. As I flipped through decades of permits, tax bills, and surveys, a single piece of paper fell out. It was a handwritten note, dated 2008, from James to someone named Marcus Vega. M. Property. Ready for Phase 1. Zoning secured. Permits in place. Now we just need capital. Project timeline. 15 years. Remember, patience builds wealth. Marcus Vega. 2008. 15 years before our Belltown project. My hands started shaking. I pulled out my phone and called Tom. I need you to check something. Does Marcus Vega have any property in Maple Valley? 10 minutes later, he called back. He owns the adjacent parcel, purchased in 2007. Why? I was starting to understand. Tom, I need you to request all communications between the Maple Valley Planning Department and either James or Marcus from 2008 to present. And I need you to find out what that land is zoned for now. What we discovered over the next week revealed that I hadn't been James's partner for 42 years. I'd been his mark for 18 of them. In 2007, Marcus and James had purchased adjacent plots in Maple Valley. At the time, the land was zoned agricultural, essentially worthless for development. But they knew something others didn't. The county was planning to extend light rail in that direction. If they could get the land rezoned to high-density residential before the rail extension was announced, it would be worth 50 times what they paid. They spent 15 years methodically working the planning process, attending every county meeting, building relationships, getting approvals. By 2023, the land was rezoned for high-density residential. The light rail extension was announced in March 2024. Their 6 acres, purchased for $40,000, were now worth $47 million. But they had a problem. They needed clean money to develop it. James couldn't just show up with $47 million in land value without explaining where he got the capital to hold it for 18 years. He needed the money to appear to come from a legitimate business. He needed to steal from our company, use our projects as cover, and make it look like a business dispute rather than a planned theft. The Belltown project was never meant to succeed. It was always just the vehicle for the fraud, and I was never James's partner. I was his cover story. Rebecca believed me when I showed her the evidence, but she looked grave. David, this shows motive, but it doesn't prove you weren't involved. A prosecutor could argue you were part of this scheme and you're just trying to save yourself now. She paused. We need more. We need something that proves James deceived you, that you had no knowledge of the Maple Valley property. I went back to Uncle Frank's letter. Remember what I taught you about records? What had he taught me? That records don't lie. That every piece of land has a history. That boundaries matter. I returned to the records office and asked for the original survey documents for both Maple Valley properties. The clerk brought me yellowed papers from 1983 and 2007, hand-drawn surveys with notes in the margins. I spread them out on the table and stared at them for an hour. Then I saw it. The 1983 survey of James's property was signed by the surveyor, Frank E. Turner. My uncle, he'd surveyed James's father's property purchase, and in his characteristic style, he'd made detailed margin notes about the property's history, its features, its potential. One note said, "Probable future transit corridor, see County Master Plan 1981. Buyer should hold long term. Flagged for follow-up 2005. My uncle had seen in 1983 what James and Marcus didn't figure out until 2007, and he'd made a note about it 42 years ago. I pulled every survey Frank had ever done in Maple Valley. There were dozens he'd spent years working that area. I found surveys from 1981, 1985, 1994, 2001, 2008, and in the 2008 survey for a property 3 parcels away from James's Frank had made another note. Cordova property now adjacent to Vega parcel. Both held long-term, no development. Confirmed suspicion. Transit corridor. Unusual coordination between unrelated parties. Flagged for review. My uncle had documented their scheme. He'd died in 2015 without knowing what would happen, but he'd left a paper trail for someone who knew how to read it. But there was more. Clipped to the back of the 2008 survey was an envelope addressed to me, postmarked 2014. I'd never seen it before. It must have been misfiled with his survey documents. I opened it with shaking hands. "David," it said in my uncle's handwriting. "I'm 81 now, and if you're reading this, I'm gone. I need to tell you something about your partner." I surveyed his father's property in 83. Good land, but there's something off about the Cordova family. They play long games. I've been watching the Maple Valley parcels for years. If you ever have trouble with James, the answer is in the land. I've left something for you at First National Bank, Safety Deposit Box 847. The key is in my surveying compass. You'll figure it out. Use it wisely. Use it for justice. The land remembers everything, even when people forget. Your Uncle Frank. I drove to my storage unit, one of the few things not frozen by the courts, and found Uncle Frank's old surveying equipment. The brass compass was heavy in my hands, worn smooth from decades of use. I unscrewed the base, and there it was, a small key taped inside. The next morning, I went to First National Bank. The vault attendant led me down to the safety deposit boxes. Box 847 was in the oldest section, barely visited. She turned her key, I turned mine, and she left me alone with it. My hands were trembling as I opened the metal box. Inside was a thick manila envelope and a letter. "David," the letter began. "If you've found this, you've found the Maple Valley connection, and you need help. In 1983, I surveyed the Cordova property. James's father paid me the standard fee, but then offered me something extra. For my discretion, he said. He wanted me to note the property as having no development potential. I refused. He got angry. Later, I discovered why he wanted to buy adjacent parcels cheap by making them seem worthless. That told me everything I needed to know about the Cordova family." The letter continued. "I spent my career documenting land. I saved carefully. When I retired in 2005, I had $380,000. I could have left it to you outright, but you were successful, didn't need it. So I made an investment in you, for when you'd need it most. I bought shares in Cascade Land Trust, a nonprofit that protects properties throughout Washington. I knew their work would endure, their mission was sound. I never told you because I didn't want you to count on it. But if you're here, you're in trouble, and this is my final survey marker pointing you toward justice." I opened the envelope. Inside were stock certificates, account statements, and a notarized document naming me as beneficiary. The Cascade Land Trust shares, purchased for $380,000 in 2005 and held for 10 years until my uncle's death, had appreciated significantly. When he died in 2015, they transferred to this safety deposit box, continuing to grow. The statement was dated January 2025. Current value, $1,847, 000. I sat in that vault room and cried. Not from relief, from gratitude. My uncle, dead for 10 years, had left me the means to fight back, and he'd structured it in a way that James could never have discovered or accessed. It wasn't luck. It was a careful, loving plan by a man who understood that the Cordova family played long games, and who made sure I'd have the resources to win when they finally made their move. But there was something else in the envelope. A second deed. I unfolded it carefully. It was for a small parcel of land, just under half an acre directly adjacent to James's Maple Valley property. My uncle had purchased it in 1984 for $8,000. It had transferred to me when he died, but I'd never known about it because it was titled under a family trust he'd created. The tax bills had been paid automatically from the trust account. I pulled up the property on my phone. It was a narrow strip of land that bordered both James's property and Marcus's. In fact, it was the only access point to their land from the main road. Without it, their properties were landlocked, undevelopable, worthless. My uncle's final note explained, "I bought this in 1984 after the Cordova father tried to bribe me. I knew someday it might matter. The land remembers David. And now, so do you." I left the bank with the stock certificates and the deed. I called Rebecca Huang. "I have the money to fight," I told her, "and I have evidence that changes everything." Over the next 3 months, Rebecca and her team worked methodically. We hired forensic accountants who traced every dollar James had stolen. We hired investigators who documented his communications with Marcus going back to 2007. We found the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the whole structure of the fraud. But most importantly, we filed a quiet title action on the Maple Valley property, a legal claim establishing my ownership of the access strip. The day that filing became public, Marcus Vega called Rebecca. "What does Turner want?" he asked. Rebecca told me, his voice was shaking. "Justice," she said. "Full restitution, criminal charges, and disbarment for you, Marcus. James can plead to federal fraud charges. Otherwise, we go to trial with everything we have." "He's bluffing," Marcus said. "He has no evidence." Rebecca faxed him a single document, Uncle Frank's 1983 survey with the margin notes, next to a photo of the 2008 note documenting James and Marcus's coordination. "We have 40 years of evidence," she said. "Your client built his scheme on land that my client's uncle surveyed. Every move you made was documented. And, by the way, that Maple Valley property you're planning to develop, it's landlocked. David owns the only access route. Without his cooperation, your $47 million property is worth nothing. So let me ask you again, what do you want to do?" The settlement negotiations took 6 weeks. James agreed to return every dollar he'd stolen, $23 million, plus interest, plus penalties. He pleaded guilty to wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy. Marcus Vega was disbarred and pleaded guilty to conspiracy. Both faced prison time. James got 12 years, Marcus got 7. But more importantly, the prosecutors dropped all charges against me. My name was cleared. The civil suits were dismissed. Our assets were unfrozen. And the Maple Valley property? Rebecca negotiated its sale to a conservation trust for $47 million. Half went to pay back the lenders James had defrauded. The rest was split between the defrauded contractors and investors. I kept the access strip and donated it to the Cascade Land Trust. It's now a public trail. Sarah and I had dinner the night the settlement was finalized. We sat at our kitchen table, a table we almost lost, and she took my hand. "I'm sorry I doubted you," she said. "You had reason to doubt," I told her. "The evidence was convincing." "No," she said. "I should have trusted who you are, not what the evidence suggested. I forgot that 42 years of integrity don't disappear overnight." "James and I were partners for 42 years, I said. "You and I have been partners for 37. I understand why you had questions. I had them too." Michael came by the next weekend. He brought his wife and their new baby, our first grandchild, born in April while everything was falling apart. I'd seen him only once, briefly, while charges were pending. "Dad," Michael said, "my firm wants me back." They apologized. "But more than that, I want you to know, even when I didn't understand what was happening, even when I was scared, I knew you. I knew who you were. I'm sorry I didn't say it louder." Jennifer took longer. She came by in July, 3 months after the settlement. We sat on the back porch, drinking coffee, not saying much. Finally, she said, "You know what the worst part was? Watching you go through this alone. Knowing that you were carrying it while everyone doubted you. I wasn't strong enough to stand with you. I'm working on being stronger." "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." "Mom said Uncle Frank saved you," she said. "But she also said you saved yourself by remembering what he taught you, about records, about truth, about patience." She paused. "Will you teach me? I organize communities, but I don't always know how to help them fight back against people with power. You beat someone who tried to destroy you. I want to learn how to do that. I spent the next year working with Rebecca's firm on other fraud cases, people who'd been betrayed by partners, cheated by lawyers, destroyed by schemes. I didn't charge for my time. I just shared what I'd learned about documents, about patience, about keeping records. Rebecca said I helped them recover $18 million for victims. But more importantly, I learned something about myself. The money, the $1.8 million from Uncle Frank, hadn't saved me. It had given me the tools to save myself. Without the knowledge of where to look, without the understanding of how to read records, without the persistence to keep searching when everything seemed lost, the money would have been useless. Uncle Frank's real gift wasn't the money. It was teaching me that truth leaves traces, that documents don't lie, that patience and methodical work defeat elaborate schemes. He'd spent his career surveying land, establishing boundaries, documenting what was real. He taught me to do the same in my life. On the 1-year anniversary of finding Uncle Frank's letter, I went to his grave. It's in a small cemetery in Maple Valley, ironically just 3 miles from the property that had caused everything. I brought the brass compass, polished bright, and I set it on his headstone. "Thank you," I said out loud. "Not just for the money, for teaching me that the truth is worth finding, that records matter, that patience defeats schemes. You did more than save me, Uncle Frank. You taught me how to save myself." I also went to see James. He was in federal prison in Sheridan, Oregon. I didn't have to go, the case was over, the appeals were exhausted, justice was served. But I wanted to understand something. The guards brought him to the visiting room. He looked older, diminished. Prison had taken his confidence. "Why are you here?" he asked. "I need to know when it changed," I said. "We were friends. We were brothers. When did you decide to betray me?" He looked at me for a long time. Finally, he said, 2007. When Marcus showed me what was possible, the Maple Valley land, the transit corridor, the money we could make, I saw a future where I didn't have to share everything with someone else, where I was the success, not half of a team. He paused. "You want me to say I'm sorry? I am sorry. Not for the planning, I'm sorry I got caught. But you want the truth? I stopped seeing you as a partner in 2007. I saw you as a resource, a means to an end, a way to build my own legacy. We built together for 35 years before that," I said. "And I was always second," he said. "Your name came first. Your vision was primary. I was the numbers guy, the support. Marcus showed me I could be first. I could be the vision. I just needed capital." I stood to leave. He said, "David, that uncle of yours, did he really leave you almost $2 million? I nodded. "Lucky," James said. "You got lucky." "No," I said. "I got loved. You've spent 40 years confusing the two. That's why you're here." I walked out and didn't look back. Sarah and I sold our house. We didn't need something that big anymore. And honestly, it held too many memories of the worst year of our lives. We bought a smaller place in Ballard, near the water, with a garden where we could grow tomatoes and a workshop where I could build furniture. I didn't start another architecture firm. At 64, I was done building for profit, but I volunteered with Habitat for Humanity, designed homes for people who needed them. I taught an evening class at community college, Reading the City, how to research property records. Jennifer came to every session, taking notes, asking questions. Michael and his wife moved closer, brought our grandchild over every Sunday. We'd make dinner together, tell stories, watch the sunset over Puget Sound. Simple things, real things. Rebecca offered me a permanent position as a consultant on fraud cases. I took it, part-time, just enough to stay busy. Every case reminded me that betrayal is common, but so is recovery. That schemes are complex, but truth is simple. That patience defeats fraud. The Cascade Land Trust sent me updates about the trail that ran through my uncle's access strip. Thousands of people walked it every year, enjoying the preserved land, completely unaware of the battle that had been fought over it. That felt right. The land had outlasted the scheme. The truth had outlasted the lies. The records had outlasted the forgeries. On my 65th birthday, Sarah gave me a gift, a brass compass, custom made by a craftsman in Portland. It looked just like Uncle Frank's, but new, polished, ready for another lifetime of use. On the base, she'd had an inscription added, "The truth is worth finding. Love, S." "You don't need it to find truth anymore," she said. "But maybe you can pass it on to someone who does. Maybe teach Jennifer, or our grandchild. Keep Uncle Frank's legacy going." That evening, sitting on our back porch, I thought about everything I'd learned. About trust and betrayal, about partnerships and loneliness, about schemes and patience. I thought about James in prison, Marcus disbarred, all that planning and evil coming to nothing. I thought about Uncle Frank, gone for a decade but still protecting me. I thought about Sarah and my kids, who doubted but returned. I thought about the people I'd helped recover from fraud. But mostly, I thought about something Uncle Frank had written in his final letter. The land remembers everything, even when people forget. The truth is, we build our lives on foundations. Some people build on schemes, on shortcuts, on betrayals. Those foundations crumble. Uncle Frank taught me to build on records, on documentation, on truth. Those foundations last. I didn't just survive James's betrayal. I learned from it. I learned that trust isn't naive, it's essential, but it must be paired with verification. I learned that 42 years of friendship can hide 18 years of planning, but truth eventually surfaces. I learned that revenge isn't justice, that patience defeats schemes, that wisdom matters more than wealth. I learned that the real inheritance my uncle left me wasn't money. It was a compass, not the brass one, but a moral one, a way of navigating the world based on truth, on records, on patience, on the belief that justice is worth fighting for. Jennifer asked me recently, "Dad, if you could go back to 2023 and know what was coming, would you still trust James? Would you still go into the Belltown project?" I thought about it. "Yes," I said, "because the alternative is living in suspicion, never trusting anyone, never building anything. James's betrayal is his failure, not mine. My trust was right. His violation of it was wrong. I won't let his evil make me cynical." "Even after everything you lost?" she asked. "I didn't lose everything," I said. "I lost money, time, reputation temporarily. But I kept my integrity. I kept my family. I kept my ability to help others. And I gained something I never had before, absolute certainty about who I am, what I stand for, and what matters. James tried to destroy me, but instead he revealed me. To myself, to my family, to everyone. And what was revealed was someone worth being. Last month, I got a letter from one of the fraud victims I'd helped. She'd been betrayed by her business partner, lost her savings, almost lost her will to fight. I'd helped her track down the hidden assets, build the case, recover her money. She wrote, "Mr. Turner, you told me that truth leaves traces, that documents don't lie, that patience defeats schemes. You were right, but more than that, you showed me that betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. It can reveal you. Thank you for teaching me to fight back, and thank you for showing me that justice is real." I put that letter on my desk, next to Uncle Frank's brass compass, next to a photo of Sarah and me on our wedding day, next to a drawing Jennifer made when she was 6 that says "Best Dad." These are the records that matter. These are the documents that don't lie. These are the foundations that last. I'm 65 years old now. I've built buildings, lost a fortune, gained it back, and learned what truly matters. James took $23 million from me. Uncle Frank left me $1.8 million. But the real wealth, the real inheritance, was the knowledge that truth is worth finding, that records don't lie, that patience defeats evil, and that integrity is the only foundation worth building on. The land remembers everything, even when people forget, and now so do I.